The two salesmen near the glass doors saw the truck first. One of them reached for his phone. The F-150 was old. Paint faded on one door. Fletcher cut the engine. Dax was already moving toward the glass. Reed Colton appeared from the hallway with two men in suits and said loud enough for the floor to hear that test drives required a confirmed appointment and proof of financing. Fletcher put a hand on Dax's shoulder and walked him out. At the threshold, he paused and looked up at the orange sign because through the open service bay, for 3 seconds, he had seen a number on a diagnostic screen that did not belong there. "We're not leaving," he told Dax. "We're just getting started." The house Fletcher and Dax lived in was a 3-bedroom rental on the east side of Dayton with a detached garage that Fletcher had converted into a working space. One fluorescent light above a lift, tools on labeled hooks, a folding table with a laptop and a stack of printed files. The business registration said Dane Auto Consulting. There was no physical sign anywhere, because there had not yet been enough business to justify one. 14 months earlier, Fletcher had been a senior compliance auditor at Meridian Automotive Compliance Group, an independent firm that contracted with dealership chains to verify their diagnostic software, warranty processing systems, and service reporting protocols. It was precise work that required a particular kind of attention. And Fletcher had that. He had spent 7 years at Meridian learning every major diagnostic platform deployed across the Midwest automotive market, including the DX9 system that his team had certified for regional use in 2021. Then Meridian lost 3 major contracts in 5 months. The auditing division was the first cut not for performance, but for math. The revenue stream that remained could not carry his team's billing rates. He had applied to 12 positions in the months that followed. 3 dealership groups told him he was overqualified. 2 regional firms had frozen hiring. The others didn't respond. He was not bitter about it. He understood the market's logic even when it wasn't convenient. So he started Dane Auto Consulting from the garage, taking what contracts came private pre-purchase inspections, used car audits for cautious buyers, a 3-week fleet engagement in Columbus that paid adequately, and went nowhere further. The revenue kept Dax in groceries and the school bus schedule intact, and Fletcher counted those facts and moved on. The van question had been building since March, when the family's old minivan threw a transmission fault that cost nearly as much to repair as a replacement vehicle. Dax was 9 and growing fast, and the back seat of the F-150 had become a negotiation every time they needed to carry more than a single bag. Fletcher ran the numbers 4 ways. Trading the truck plus a modest loan covered the difference. Oren Auto Group on Miller Road carried the van model he needed and offered a financing program that didn't require a long corporate income history. That had been the plan when he pulled into their lot that Tuesday morning with Dax beside him pointing at the vehicles through the windshield before they stopped. He sat at the garage desk after Dax was in bed, opened the laptop, and pulled up his archived Meridian project files, his own work product, permitted under the separation agreement. He found Oren Auto Group on page 4 of the DX9 deployment list. They had licensed the platform the same quarter his team certified it. Fletcher hadn't worked the Oren account directly, but he had written the calibration protocol. He knew every parameter the system was built around, every threshold range, every flag condition. The number on that service bay screen did not match any of them. Camille Oren arrived at the Miller Road location by 7:45 every morning, 45 minutes before the sales floor opened. She used the time to review overnight logs, check the previous day's close numbers, and respond to anything from legal or the bank that couldn't wait. The Columbus expansion had been consuming more of that window than she liked 8 weeks from groundbreaking, and 3 permitting items were still unresolved. Reed Colton ran the operations floor. He had run it since her father brought him in 12 years earlier, back when Oren Auto Group was 4 locations and a regional reputation. When her father's health forced him to step back 3 years ago, Reed had been the reason the transition held together. Camille understood the strategic side of the business, the capital structure, the expansion logic, the bank relationships. Reed knew the floor. She trusted him the way you trust the mechanism inside a watch. You don't examine it, you rely on it, and you read the time. That morning, Reed presented the quarterly numbers for the extended warranty division. The margin was strong, stronger than the previous quarter, which had already been strong. He attributed it to tighter claims documentation and an improved processing relationship with the insurance partner. The figures on the page looked clean. Camille looked them over and moved on. 3 floors below, in the service department, a 27-year-old diagnostic technician named Teo Marsh was sitting at his station studying a system log that had been bothering him for 11 days. The log showed fault code triggers on vehicles enrolled in the extended warranty program. The trigger patterns matched DX9 output, but the threshold values, the parameters that told the system when to flag a fault, were sitting at numbers that Teo could not reconcile with any standard calibration setting he had encountered. He had submitted a ticket 12 days ago. Reed Colton had closed it the same afternoon. Calibration variance, standard. No action required. Teo had printed the log and locked it in his desk drawer because he didn't know what else to do with something he couldn't explain and couldn't get anyone to look at. That evening, Camille received an email from a sender address that resolved to nothing, a disposable account, already deactivated by the time she tried to trace it. One line. Ask Colton about the DX9 threshold settings. Then ask who approved the change. She forwarded it to Reed. His reply came back in 4 minutes. Competitor spam? He would have it flag the domain. She deleted it from her inbox. But the phrasing stayed with her DX9 threshold settings, too specific to be a generic smear. Whoever sent it knew what diagnostic system Orin operated. She filed the thought in the back of her mind and returned to the Columbus permitting files. Fletcher came back to Orin Auto Group the following afternoon without Dax. He had spent the morning at his desk putting together a clean folder, 2 months of Dane Consulting invoices, a personal credit summary printed from his bank portal, a written trade-in breakdown for the truck, and a 1-page letter addressing the gap in his W-2 history. It was documentation that answered every question a financing department could reasonably raise. He had written it the same way he used to write audit findings: anticipate the objection, address it before it becomes one. He arrived at 2:15 and told the receptionist he was there for the specialty vehicles department. She told him it was appointment only, and the next available slot was Thursday. Fletcher said he would wait. He sat in one of the chairs near the entrance and set the folder on his knee. Salesmen moved through the showroom. One glanced at him twice and kept walking. A family came in looking at SUVs. An hour went by. Reed Colton came through the atrium at 3:20 with the same 2 men from the insurance partnership. He saw Fletcher and stopped. "You're back," Colton said. His tone was the one people use for whether they expected. Fletcher stood. "I came back with documentation." Colton glanced at the folder without taking it. "A credit printout doesn't change the intake process, sir. You still need a scheduled appointment. I've been here an hour waiting for one. Then someone will be with you shortly." Colton turned slightly toward the men beside him, dropping his voice just enough to still carry across the floor. "We get a lot of walk-ins who aren't quite in the right position yet. Part of the territory." One of the men smiled. The other looked at the floor. A young woman near the reception desk raised her phone. Fletcher noticed the motion and did not react. "I understand the process," Fletcher said. "I'd like to follow it." Colton studied him for a moment, with the patience of someone who had already decided what kind of conversation this was. "The best thing at this point is to schedule online and come back when the team is ready for you." He said it gently, then turned and walked toward the conference room without looking back. Fletcher stood in the center of the showroom floor. The receptionists looked at their screens. The salesman who had passed him twice was examining something on a tablet near the far wall. Camille had come down from the administrative floor to review a service walkthrough with her operations lead. She stepped off the elevator and caught the end of the exchange, Colton's back moving away, the insurance men following, and Fletcher standing very still in the middle of the floor, folder at his side. He did not look humiliated. He did not look angry. He looked like a man taking careful inventory of what he was looking at. She started across the floor toward him, then stopped. She did not know what she would say, and Reed had said it was handled. The building's security officer appeared at Fletcher's elbow. Fletcher nodded once and walked out without a word. At the threshold, he paused and looked up at the orange sign, the same look as the day before, reading rather than seeing. Then he walked to his truck, set the folder on the passenger seat, and sat with the engine off for a moment before he drove. The next morning, Fletcher stopped at a gas station 3 blocks from the Orin location on his way back from dropping Dax at school. A sedan was sitting at the far pump with its hood propped, and a young man in an Orin polo shirt standing beside it, looking at his phone with the concentrated unhappiness of someone who had already called everyone he could think of. Fletcher parked, got out, and looked at the engine without being invited. "What year?" he said. The young man looked up. 2014. Fletcher leaned in. Coolant level was fine. Battery terminals were clean. He looked at the sensor cluster near the intake assembly and found it in about 20 seconds a temperature sender, with a degraded ground contact, loose enough to send the car's computer a false overheating signal, which cut fuel injection as a protective response. "Push that connector in," he said, pointing. The young man pressed it. Fletcher told him to try the ignition. The engine started on the first attempt and settled into a clean idle. They stood there a moment. "I'm Teo," the young man said. "I work at the dealership down the block." "I know," Fletcher said. "I've been there twice this week." Teo looked at him carefully. "You're the guy Reed." He stopped. "Yeah." Teo was quiet for a moment. "How did you know it was the sender?" "You didn't run a scanner." "You don't always need one," Fletcher said. He started back toward his truck. "Do you work in automotive? Like technically?" Fletcher paused. "I used to do compliance auditing. Software and warranty systems." Teo went still. It was a specific kind of stillness. The kind that happens when a question you've been sitting with alone suddenly finds someone who might understand it. He looked toward the Orin building down the street, then back at Fletcher. "Do you know how DX9 diagnostic logging works? How the system records and flags fault codes specifically?" "Depends on the configuration." "Why?" Teo took out his phone and held up a photograph of a printed log columns of alphanumeric codes and timestamp values. Fletcher took the phone and looked at it for roughly 15 seconds without speaking. "This is flagging a fault condition outside the normal trigger range for this mileage bracket," he said. "Either the threshold has been manually adjusted, or you have hardware producing phantom readings. But phantom readings don't cluster this consistently across different vehicles." Teo said nothing. Fletcher handed the phone back. "Which location is this from?" Teo didn't answer. Fletcher looked at him. "If it's what I think it is, that's not a calibration variance. Someone opened the administrative settings and changed that threshold value deliberately." He said it without inflection, without accusation. The way a finding reads in a compliance report. Teo held the phone in both hands and did not ask another question. He stood with the engine running behind him, and something settling in his expression that had been unresolved for nearly 2 weeks. Fletcher got into his truck and drove to the school parking lot to pick up a permission slip he'd forgotten to sign. He sat in the lot afterward and opened his Meridian archive on the laptop he kept behind the seat and spent 30 minutes tracing the exact chain of custody for the DX9 threshold parameters his team had certified in 2021. The number on the service bay screen was not instrument drift. It was not noise from age or use or wear. It was a choice that someone had made and documented and expected would never be found. That night, after Dax was asleep, Fletcher sat at the garage desk and worked through the math carefully. Orin had been a licensed DX9 operator since the third quarter of 2021. If the threshold adjustment had been in place from early in the deployment, and the clustering pattern Teo had photographed suggested it had been, then the system had been triggering false fault codes on extended warranty vehicles for somewhere between 16 and 20 months. He cross-referenced the DX9 certification documentation against the fault code families visible in the log photo. 4 categories were involved: oxygen sensor faults, transmission fluid contamination alerts, brake system pressure anomalies, coolant temperature exceedance events. None of the underlying conditions were real, but the fault codes were real. The repair orders those codes generated were real. The warranty claims filed against those repair orders were real and documented and had been paid. A service advisor writing up a work order had no reason to question a DX9 flag the system was the certification. An insurance claims processor reviewing a repair history had no reason to question it. A vehicle owner, receiving a call that their car had triggered a fault their warranty plan covered, would have no reason to doubt it at all. He sat back from the desk and looked at the ceiling for a long moment. Then he thought about 460 people, a number Teo hadn't yet given him, but which would come the next morning, who had paid for extended warranty coverage in good faith, and were being billed for repairs their vehicles had never needed. He pulled up Sandra Kwan's number. It was past 10, but Sandra kept late hours and did not treat late calls as an imposition from people she had worked with for 7 years. She picked up on the third ring. I need to ask you something about whistleblower protections under the Ohio Consumer Sales Practices Act, Fletcher said. A brief pause. Fletcher, it's been a while. It has. I'm sorry for the hour. Tell me what you have. He told her not everything yet because he didn't have everything but enough. The log. The threshold adjustment. His history with the certification protocol. The fact that he hadn't accessed any of Oren's systems directly. The fact that the data had come voluntarily from an employee who held current authorized access. Sandra asked 4 precise questions. She was quiet for a moment after the last one. Then, if everything you're telling me is accurate, you're on solid ground. You're a former auditor with independent technical knowledge of the system being misused, receiving voluntary disclosure from an authorized party. That's a protected pathway. What's my exposure? 0. As long as you don't touch their systems. Get the documentation in a form that can be transmitted. And Fletcher moved carefully. Someone who set this up knew what they were doing. They've thought about discovery. He thanked her and ended the call. He did not sleep easily, but he hadn't slept easily in 14 months, and there was nothing unusual about that. The following morning, Teo Marsh arrived at his workstation and found a reassignment notice in his inbox. Effective immediately, he was being moved to the customer relations team. No explanation. His DX9 access had already been revoked. The notice called it Standard Procedure for Interdepartment Transfers. He sat at his desk and stared at the screen for a long time. Then he unlocked the bottom drawer, took out the folder with the printed log, placed it in his bag, and texted Fletcher from the parking lot during his lunch break. I need to show you something. Not at the dealership. They met at a coffee shop 4 blocks east of the Miller Road location. Teo set the folder on the table between them, 11 pages, and rested his hands flat on the surface afterward, the way a person's hands go flat after setting something heavy down that they've been carrying for a while. Fletcher read through the pages without speaking. The coffee shop went through its midday cycle around them, filling and thinning. When he reached the last page, he set it down and looked at Teo directly. How many customers are in the extended warranty program? As of last quarter, 463. Fletcher looked at the pages. Every fault code in here corresponds to a repair procedure covered under the warranty plan, and every one of these flags is being generated by threshold settings that have no legitimate technical basis. Whoever configured these values knew the system well enough to stay inside the band where automated quality review would pass clean. Teo was quiet for a moment. How do you know this system? I wrote the calibration protocol for this version, Fletcher said. 2021. Teo stared at him without speaking. Go home after your shift, Fletcher said. Don't access any system, not even ones you still have rights to. Don't speak to Colton. What are you going to do? Fletcher closed the folder and slid it back across to Teo. Keep this somewhere other than work. Don't leave it in your car. He paid for both coffees, walked out to his truck, and called Sandra. He gave her the full picture, all 11 pages, the 4 fault categories, the cluster pattern, the timeline estimate. Sandra asked 3 questions and said she was ready to move. She asked whether he wanted the Ohio Attorney General referral filed before or concurrent with the internal board notification. Concurrent, Fletcher said. I want Camille Oren in the room when it happens. She deserves to be there. Sandra said she would have the filing prepared within 48 hours. That same afternoon, a second anonymous email arrived in Camille's inbox from the same format of sender another disposable address, already inactive. The text was nearly identical to the first. Ask Colton about the DX9 threshold settings, then ask who approved the change. This time she did not forward it to Reed. She called the IT director and asked what DX9 was. He looked it up and explained it was the diagnostic platform running in all 7 of their service bays. She asked when it had been installed. 3rd quarter of 2021, he said. She asked who had coordinated the implementation. Reed Colton, he said. She thanked him and ended the call. Then she pulled up the internal ticket system and searched DX9. One closed ticket appeared submitted 12 days earlier by a technician named Teo Marsh. Closed the same afternoon by Reed Colton. Marked calibration variance. No action required. Tio Marsh had been transferred to customer relations the following morning. She sat with that sequence for a long time, reading it twice, then a third time. Then she called Teo directly. He picked up on the second ring, hesitated for 3 or 4 seconds, and then told her everything: the log, the numbers, the man named Fletcher Dane he had met at a gas station who used to work at Meridian Automotive Compliance Group. Camille wrote the name down. She found the Meridian certification records in the company's archived vendor files in under 20 minutes. The DX9 protocol documentation listed one author, F. Dane. She picked up her phone. Fletcher was in the garage, replacing a worn belt on the F-150's auxiliary drive when his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. "Mr. Dane," the voice said. "This is Camille Oren. I'd like to meet." He was quiet for a moment. "You know where I work? Your COO was at my front door 2 nights ago." A pause. "When can I come?" She arrived the following morning at 8:15, alone, in a gray sedan that she parked beside the phone 150 inches the driveway. Fletcher was at the folding table with a mug of coffee when she stepped through the open side door of the garage. He didn't move to shake her hand or offer her a seat. He looked at her the way he looked at most things, steadily, without ceremony. Camille looked around the space. Tools arranged on labeled hooks. A single lift. A laptop open beside a stack of printed pages. And, above the power strip on the rear wall, a photograph of a boy taped at an angle, the tape going slightly yellow at the corners. "You wrote the calibration protocol," she said. "Yes, for the system running in my service bays." "Yes." She looked at the pages on the table. "May I?" He stepped aside. She read for 14 minutes without speaking. Fletcher poured a second mug of coffee and set it within her reach, without comment. At 8:40, Dax came out from the house, looked at Camille with the unhurried assessment of a 9-year-old meeting someone for the second time, said good morning, and went back inside to finish his breakfast. Camille set the last page down. "How long has it been running?" she said. "Based on the earliest timestamps in the log, 18 months. Possibly longer. The log Teo gave me only covers the last 11 weeks. 18 months. She said it quietly. Not to Fletcher. Just aloud. 463 customers, Fletcher said. Extended warranty holders, billed for service work their vehicles didn't need. The repair orders look clean. The insurance documentation looks clean. But the fault triggers that generated those orders were manufactured. She was quiet for a long moment. "Why didn't you go straight to the Attorney General?" "Because it's your company," Fletcher said. She looked at him directly then, the way she had not quite managed in the showroom or anywhere near it. He said it plainly, without softness or performance. It was a statement of fact. The company was hers, and she was entitled to know before the state of Ohio did. "Reed has been with us for 12 years, she said. Fletcher did not respond to that. 2 nights ago, she said, "What did he offer you?" "A 6-month consulting contract." He framed it as an apology for what happened in the showroom. Camille was quiet. She set her coffee mug down carefully. "And you closed the door." "I did." "What's your legal standing on the Meridian documentation?" "My separation agreement lets me retain my own work product. The protocol is mine. I can speak to what it specifies and what it doesn't." She nodded slowly. "I need to call my legal team. I need 30 minutes first." She looked at him. "Why?" "Because I want to know who I'm working with before the clock starts moving." She absorbed that without visible reaction. Fair. He went out to the driveway and called Sandra. Fletcher stood beside the F-150 and gave her the situation. Camille was inside. The board meeting was set for 11. The filing needed to land concurrent with the internal notification. Sandra said, "You're giving her a courtesy she hasn't earned." "She drove here alone without calling first," Fletcher said. "She read 14 pages of log documentation at this table and didn't ask me to explain a single number." "That's enough." "All right. The filing goes to the AG at 10:45. I'll be at the building by 10:50. "Thank you." He ended the call and went back inside. Camille was at the table, looking at the log entries still open on the laptop screen. She looked up when he came in. "Done?" she said. "Done," he said. "We can go." The board meeting was called for 11 o'clock. Camille told Reed it was a Columbus permitting update, requiring all senior leadership. He arrived with a legal pad and a cup of coffee, composed, unhurried. The way a man arrives to a meeting he believes he controls. The other board members and department heads filled in over the next 10 minutes. Legal counsel, the IT director, the head of finance, 6 people around a glass table in a room on the 4th floor where the windows looked out over the Miller Road lot, where Fletcher's F-150 sat in visitor parking between 2 newer vehicles, looking exactly like what everyone in this building had decided it was. Fletcher arrived at 10:58. The security officer at the conference room door looked at him. From the head of the table, Camille said, "He's with me." Reed's expression, when Fletcher entered, was controlled. A fast, private calculation crossed his face and was gone before anyone else could read it. He set his coffee cup down very deliberately and picked up his pen. Fletcher did not look at Reed. He set his laptop on the table, connected the display cable, and opened the file he had prepared the night before. No title slide, no introduction, just 2 columns of data projected onto the screen at the end of the room, side by side. The left column was the DX9 factory calibration specification. The certified threshold values defining exactly when the system was built to flag a fault condition. The column had been exported directly from the Meridian Certification Archive, time-stamped and signed by Fletcher's team in 2021. The right column was the active configuration currently running in Orange 7 service bays, drawn from the log documentation Teo had printed and carried in a folder in his bag for 11 days. Every line was different. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when people stop breathing at their normal rate. Not silence exactly, but a withdrawal of ordinary sound. Fletcher looked at Reed Colton. The system is flagging fault codes outside the certified trigger range. I know this because I wrote the calibration protocol for this version. Every threshold in the right column has been pushed beyond the certified limit, not by wear, not by calibration drift, but by a deliberate administrative change made inside the system's configuration panel. Whoever made these changes understood exactly how far they could push the values before the automated audit layer would detect an anomaly. He paused 1 beat. That kind of precision isn't an error. That's a signature. No one spoke. Reed set his pen down on his legal pad. He did it carefully, the way you set down something you are afraid of dropping. This is a misreading of the spec. The vendor issued a service bulletin updating the threshold ranges 18 months ago. It was standard procedure. There is no service bulletin, Fletcher said. I contacted Meridian's successor firm this morning. No threshold revision was ever issued for the DX9 platform after the original certification. Their records are consistent with the factory spec in the left column. Then there is an error in those records. Fletcher opened another file on the laptop. The system change log shows an administrative override entered on October 9th of 2022 at 6:17 in the morning. The user account that made the change carries the ID prefix OAGADMIN04. He looked at the IT director at the far end of the table. That account can be pulled right now. The IT director looked at Camille. She nodded. He typed. He checked the screen. He typed again. He looked up. OAGADMIN04 was created on October 3rd of 2022. Created and authorized by Reed Colton. It doesn't appear in the standard employee directory. Silence. Reed leaned back in his chair. I created that account as a backup administrative credential during the system rollout. It's standard practice when you're deploying a platform across multiple locations. A backup credential, Camille said, created 6 months after the rollout was complete. Used at 6:17 in the morning on a change that altered fault thresholds across all 7 locations simultaneously. Reed looked at her. He did not answer. The conference room door opened. Sandra Kwan entered carrying 2 manila folders. She walked to the table without introducing herself to the room and placed 1 folder in front of Camille and 1 in front of the company's legal counsel. I'm Sandra Kwan. I represent Mr. Dane. What's in front of you is a copy of a complaint filed this morning with the Ohio Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. So, it includes the system log documentation, the original DX9 certification protocol, the administrative change log entry, and the account registration data pulled by your IT department approximately 4 minutes ago. She looked at Colton without any particular emphasis. The filing was held pending this meeting as a professional courtesy to Oren Auto Group. The AG's office received it at 10:45. Reed looked at Camille. She did not look back. She was looking at the folder Sandra had placed in front of her. At the top sheet, which listed the names of 463 warranty customers, the board voted to suspend Reed Colton pending full investigation. The vote took 6 minutes and was not close. 2 members of Oren's legal team accompanied him out of the building. He did not say anything. In the hallway outside the conference room, he paused at the elevator. And Fletcher, watching through the glass, thought he might turn around and say something, address Camille. Address Fletcher, claim something. He pressed the button. The doors opened. He stepped in. The room cleared in stages. Legal counsel stayed to review the AG documentation with Sandra. The IT director stayed to assist. The head of finance left quietly. The other board members left in twos. Camille stayed at the head of the table. When the last person who didn't need to be there had gone, she sat looking at the 2-column projection, still running on the screen, 2 sets of numbers that represented 18 months of charges against people who had trusted that the system watching their vehicles was working. Honestly, Fletcher closed the laptop. The screen went dark. "What do you want?" she said. He stood by the window with his hands in his jacket pockets. Outside, in the lot 4 stories below, his truck sat in visitor parking in the afternoon light. He thought about the question the way he thought about most things, deliberately, without rushing toward the answer. "A fair shot at the compliance contract," he said. "Open bid. I'll compete on merit." She looked at him for a moment. That's it. She was quiet. Then, "You could have gone to the AG in October when you first saw that screen. I saw one number for 3 seconds. That's not evidence. That's a feeling. You could have gone after Teo gave you the log. I needed to know if anyone on the inside already knew." She looked at her hands on the table. "And did anyone?" "You did," he said. "Once you started looking." She sat with that for a moment, with what it meant about the 2 emails she had almost ignored, about the ticket she had found only after she stopped forwarding things to Reed and started pulling them herself. Then she nodded once and picked up her phone. Oren Auto Group sent written notification to 463 customers within 30 days, a full refund of any service charges tied to the affected fault categories, plus a 4-year warranty extension at no cost. The supplemental disclosure to the AG was filed at the same time. Reed Colton was indicted on 7 counts of consumer fraud and 2 counts of insurance fraud in the second month following the board meeting. His insurance partner was named in the civil portion of the proceedings. Both cases remained active. The compliance contract went to open bids 6 weeks later. Fletcher spent 4 days on the proposal, 3 more than any proposal he'd written in 14 months, and knew when he finished it that it was the best work he had done since Meridian. Dane Auto Consulting won. The evaluation panel noted that no firm in the submission pool had equivalent direct certification experience with the DX9 platform. The contract ran 18 months. He signed it at the garage desk on a Tuesday afternoon with Dax beside him doing long division homework, using the same pen he used for everything. Without ceremony, the van he eventually bought came from a dealership in Springboro, 20 minutes south, not because of any lasting feeling toward Oren Auto Group, but because the whole sequence had been about fairness from the beginning, and buying the van somewhere he hadn't been escorted out of felt like the honest way to close that particular loop. Dax sat in the 3rd-row seat on the drive home and declared the legroom perfect. Fletcher watched him in the rearview mirror and agreed. Teo Marsh was reinstated to the service department 2 weeks after the board meeting and promoted to senior diagnostic analyst. His new access included read-only rights to the administrator logs, reviewed on a weekly schedule. Camille told him in a short meeting that he had done the right thing. He said he should have moved faster. She said he had moved when it counted, and she meant it without qualification. Camille came to the garage on a Saturday morning in late May. She didn't call ahead. She parked the gray sedan beside the phone, 150 inches the driveway, and walked through the side door, and found Fletcher under the truck doing routine maintenance with the radio on at low volume. She looked at the truck. "You didn't trade it in. It runs fine. You have a van now." "The van is for Dax." He rolled out from under the frame and stood up, wiping his hands on a shop towel. "What are you here for?" She looked around the garage, the labeled hooks, the folding table with its second monitor now, the Dane Auto Consulting letterhead visible on the screen, the photograph of Dax still taped in the same spot above the power strip. I talked to my father last week, she said. He told me he'd known something was off with the warranty numbers 2 years ago. He didn't look harder because Reed told him not to worry about it. Okay. He told me not to trust the people who explain numbers away. Trust the numbers. That's right. She was quiet a moment. I came to say thank you. In person. I should have done it earlier. You didn't owe me a visit. No, she said. I came anyway. The radio played something quiet and indistinct. Outside, a neighbor's dog was barking at something 2 houses down. And then it wasn't. Dax appeared in the doorway from the house, looked at Camille with the considered calm of a 9-year-old who had met someone once before and decided she seemed all right, and said, "Are you staying for dinner? Dad's making the pasta thing." Fletcher looked at the far wall. Camille looked at Fletcher. "I haven't been invited," she said. Fletcher set the shop towel on the workbench. "The pasta thing takes 40 minutes, he said. "You're welcome to stay." It was not an elaborate offer. It was a real one. And she could tell the difference. He hadn't set out to expose anyone. He had driven to a dealership to buy a van at a fair price, been shown out before he'd finished the first sentence, and gone home and started thinking because that was what he did, and what no one who looked at his truck in a parking lot would have guessed about him. The rest of it had followed from that, the way most things follow when a person refuses to walk away from something that doesn't add up. Sometimes the clearest view of a broken system belongs to the person everyone decided wasn't worth a second look.